Right now, while you're watching this, the world around you is filled with information. Sounds, colors, faces, movement, voices, light. Things happening around you that you aren't even consciously noticing. And yet, you experience all of this as one continuous reality. One moment, one world, one experience. But here's the strange part. You could never consciously experience everything happening around you at once. Your attention is limited. Your senses are constantly receiving information, but only some of that information becomes part of what you consciously notice. So, what happens to everything else? It doesn't necessarily disappear. You simply aren't aware of it. And that raises a much bigger question. If your mind is constantly selecting what you notice, how much of the world are you actually experiencing? And if what you experience depends partly on what your mind selects, then perhaps seeing isn't as simple as it feels. Because you don't experience the world directly, you experience the world through a mind. But attention doesn't move randomly. Something pulls it. A sudden sound, a movement in the corner of your eye, your name being called across a crowded room, a face you recognize, something you're searching for, something you're afraid of, something you care about. The same environment can contain the same information, and yet, two people can notice completely different things. Not necessarily because one of them has better eyes, but because they're looking for different things. Imagine walking through a crowded airport. One person is searching for their family. Another is watching the departure board. Someone else is looking for an empty seat. The airport hasn't changed, but their experiences of it are different. Their attention is being guided by different goals. And this happens constantly. You don't simply look at the world. You look for things within the world, which means that before you even realize you're paying attention, something may already be determining what seems important. And that leads to a deeper question. If your attention is influenced by what you expect, what happens when your expectations are wrong? Because sometimes, your mind doesn't wait for reality to tell it what something is. It makes a prediction first. Imagine you're walking down a familiar street at night. You see something in the distance. For a moment, it looks like a person standing beneath a streetlight. Your body reacts before you've had time to think about it. You slow down. You look again. And then you realize it's a tree. Nothing about the object changed. What changed was your interpretation of it. And this happens far more often than we realize. Your brain is constantly trying to make sense of incomplete information. It uses what you've seen before, what you already know, what you expect, and what seems most likely to interpret what you're experiencing right now. You don't wait for every piece of information to arrive before beginning to understand the world. Your mind is already making predictions. Most of the time, those predictions are so fast and so familiar that you never notice them happening. You simply experience the result. You see a face. You recognize a voice. You understand a sentence before the person has finished speaking. You look at an object and almost instantly know what it is. It feels effortless. But underneath that effortless experience, your mind is constantly working to turn incomplete information into something meaningful. And when the information is uncertain, your expectations can become even more important. Which means, sometimes, what you expect to see can influence what you actually experience. And if your mind is constantly predicting, then perception becomes something more complicated than simply seeing, because the same information can produce different experiences. Think about an optical illusion. The image hasn't changed. Your eyes haven't suddenly stopped working. And yet, what you perceive can change. You can look at the same shape and see something different. Look again, and suddenly you can't see it the way you did before. The information was there the entire time, but your interpretation of that information changed. And this isn't limited to illusions. Context can change what you notice. Expectations can change what you anticipate. Emotion can change what feels important. And suddenly, the world you experience can feel different, even when the world itself hasn't changed very much. Then there's memory. We often imagine memory as a recording. Something happens, the brain stores it, and later we play it back. But human memory doesn't work quite that simply. When you remember something, you're not necessarily retrieving a perfect copy of the past. You're reconstructing it, your current knowledge, your expectations, your emotions, and everything you've learned since can influence how that memory comes back to you. And that matters, because memory doesn't just tell you what happened. It helps you understand what is happening now. A past experience can change what you expect from the next one. A previous failure can make a new opportunity feel threatening. A past success can make the same challenge feel exciting. The world hasn't necessarily changed, but the mind experiencing it has. And perhaps this is the pattern we've been following all along. Attention decides what becomes prominent. Prediction helps us interpret what we encounter. Perception gives that information meaning. Memory carries the past into the present. And together, they shape the experience we call reality. Not reality itself, but our experience of it. And maybe that's the part worth paying attention to. Because if you understand that your experience is being filtered, interpreted, and constantly updated, you don't have to distrust your mind. You simply become more curious about it. You can begin asking, why did I notice that? Why did I interpret it this way? Why did this feel so important? What was I expecting to happen? And what else might I have missed? Because perhaps seeing clearly doesn't mean removing every filter. Maybe it means becoming aware that the filters are there. You will never experience everything. You will never know everything. And you may never see the world exactly as it is. But you can become more aware of the mind through which you see it. And perhaps that is where a different kind of freedom begins. Not in knowing everything, but in knowing that what you experience is not the whole story.